Welcome everybody to this afternoon's Discrete Maths and Probability seminar. It's a huge pleasure to have my friend and co-author Benedicta Us, who's going to be talking to us about tail asymptotics for extinction times of self-similar fragmentations. Over to you, Benny.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you, Alex, also for the invitation. So I'm very pleased to be back in Oxford, at least virtually. I hope I could come back one day again in person, but we have to be patient, I think. So the goal of my talk is to give some information on the distribution of some positive random variables on which we don't know much and that arise as the scaling, as the extinction times of some fragmentation processes. So maybe some of you are more familiar with random trees. So equivalently, we can see these random variables at the height of a family of continuous compact random trees. I recall that the height of a rooted tree is the maximal distance to its root. Or equivalently, and of course it's related, we can see this random variable as some scaling limits of the heights of some sequence of discrete trees. So the prototype example is a well-known example that probably all of you know. If you take a random tree which is uniformly distributed in the set of rooted tree with n nodes, and so we consider its height, and so it's well known that if you divide this height by square root of n, it will converge in distribution to some random variable which is distributed up to a scaling constant as a maximum of a standard Brownian excursion. So this well-known random variable, the maximum of a standard Brownian excursion, is one example of the family of random variable I am interested in. Okay. So the talk will be divided in three parts. A first part, which is an introduction part, where I will present the objects we will work with, self-similar fragmentation, their extinction times, and I will also explain the connection with random trees. So I see that in the audience there are many specialists of this topic, so maybe for this first part you can sleep and wake up for the second part. So in the second part, I will present the main new result of this talk, which is the asymptotic behavior of the tail distribution of those random variables we are interested in. And I will also discuss several examples to illustrate the result, which is a bit abstract. And in the third part, I will say a word on the proof. So, well, I will not go at all into the details, but my goal is just to present the main steps. So just a word of how this I started to think about this, because it's kind of old. I mean, it's connected to some old stuff I've done nearly 20 years ago. I was discussing quite recently with one of my colleagues in Paris Nord, Bastien Malin, and he asked me some question about self-similar fragmentation, and thinking about his question, which is not the question we are going to talk about here, leads me to this result on the asymptotic of the tail distribution, which I think was missing and is interesting. So I will start slowly and present in detail the fragmentation processes we are going to consider. And on this first slide, I consider a fragmentation model in a very large context. So in general, when we talk about fragmentation models, it means that we consider the evolution of some objects, you can imagine particles or whatever, that split repeatedly as time goes on. Okay, so on my picture here, let me just, can you see the red stuff? Okay, so on my picture, I start with one object at time 0, say, that will wait some time, and after that time split in fragments. And each of these fragments, in turn, will wait some time and split in sub-fragments, and etc., and so on. Okay. So that kind of model were extensively studied in mathematics, both in the deterministic context with the fragmentation equations and random context with fragmentation processes. Because of course it models very natural models that arise in other science, in biology, chemistry, computer science. There are also motivation coming from mathematics. There are some connection with random trees, random graph also, more general random graph I meant. And it appears that it's possible to put in place some relatively general models that match to reality and that relatively easy to study. Okay, so. Okay, sorry. So here we will focus on random models where the objects are only characterized by their mass, okay, not by their shape or other characteristic. We only consider the masses of the object, and we will observe the evolution of these masses. And the models we consider will have to satisfy two main properties: a branching property, which means that different objects evolve independently, and the self-similarity property, which roughly, I will precise this a bit in 2 minutes, self-similarity property, which means that an object will split at a rate which is proportional to a fixed power of its mass. Okay, so since we are only interested in the masses of particles, we will work on this space. Sorry, I cannot change the slide when my pen is open. So we will work on this space S, which is a space of decreasing sequence with sum less or equal to 1. Okay, so I forget to say that we will always start at time 0 with a unique object, one object, and we decide that his mass is 1. And so we let the system go on, and at time t, we will denote by ft the sequence of masses that are present at time t, masses that we have ranked in the decreasing order. Okay, so at time 0, f0 is the sequence 1, 0, 0, etc. And we, in our space S, we include the sequence with some possibly strictly less than 1, because in our system, it's possible that some 0 particles arise, and it's even possible that a huge quantity of 0 particles arise. So when we will have a lot of 0 particles, a set of which is not countable, we will not consider them in this sequence Ft. We will only consider in Ft the strictly positive mass. And this difference between 1 and this sum of Si will correspond to this total mass of 0 mass particle. I will come back to this, but just to say why I'm including this less than 1 here. Okay, so we have a random process living in this space S. And the way it evolves will depend on 2 parameters, which describe how mass fragments in a subfragment. So the rule is the following, and I will explain it more clearly in the next slide, but the main rule can be summed up as follows. Each time you have a mass S, it will split in submasses ms1, ms2, etc., where the sequence S1, S2 is in S, at some rate m to the power alpha, which is one of the parameters we have fixed, times a measure nu, which is the second parameter we have fixed. So the parameter alpha is called the index of self-similarity, and it's a real number for the moment, any real number. And the measure nu is a measure on this space S. Okay. So in the next slide, I will explain more precisely how it goes on. Let me just say here that there have been many studies on this model, starting first a priori with a paper by Kolmogorov in 1941. So in his paper, Kolmogorov considered discrete time process where the alpha here is always equal to 0, which means that all the particles split at the same rate. 20 years later, Filipov, who was a student of Kolmogorov, considered a more general case where with alpha being any real number, his models were continuous time process, and both in Kolmogorov and Filipov papers, the measure nu was finite. Okay. Later on, Brennan and Duret also studied this process. So in their case, it was only what we call binary fragmentation, which means that each mass splits into only in two pieces. It could be any alpha and a finite measure nu. And at the beginning of this century, Berthoin introduced the general setting that I am presenting here. So self-similar fragmentation with any parameter alpha in R and measure nu that may possibly be infinite. And since then, there have been a lot of studies on this model. So let me now, in the next slide, present a bit more clearly how the process evolved. Okay, so I start to explain how it works when the measure nu is finite. And since we are only interested in masses of particles, I will consider interval. And the length of an interval corresponds to the mass, to what I call its mass. And so we start with interval 0, 1 that will split as follows. So we have fixed the two parameter alpha nu. The initial mass will weight an exponential time which is distributed according to an exponential distribution with parameter nu s, so the total mass of the measure nu. And after that time, it will split according to the probability, which is the measure nu divided by its mass. Okay. Then on my picture, we obtain three fragments, one with mass 1/2, the second one with mass 1/3, and the third one with mass 1/6. And now how each of these new fragments will evolve independently of the other. And each of them will split after random time, which is distributed according to an exponential distribution with parameter the mass of the fragment to the power alpha times the total mass of the measure nu. And at the time where it's split, again, it's split according to the probability, which is nu divided by its total mass, and so on. Okay? So the mean of an exponential distribution with parameter lambda is 1 over lambda. So the mean time of splitting of a fragment with mass n is m to the power minus alpha divided by nu s. Okay. So you can observe that if alpha is strictly positive, then the large fragment split faster in mean than the smaller one. But when alpha is negative, well, the contrary phenomenon occurs, and small fragment split faster than the large one in mean. And we will be interested in what follows to what happens in this second case. Let me just quickly say a word on the extension of this model to the case where the measure nu may be infinite. So it's a bit complicated to introduce it in detail, and I don't want to do it, but just say that when nu is infinite, the idea is that the time at which the fragment split is immediate. It's time 0 plus, okay? So in a finite interval of time, you will have infinitely many fragmentation of a fragment. And you can construct this precisely by using Poisson point processes. So this has been done by Jean Berthoin and Julien Berestiki. I won't explain it in more detail, but just still recall this: a particle with mass m splits at time at the rate m to the power alpha times nu, which means that it splits m to the power alpha faster than a particle with mass 1. Okay. So let's now focus on the case where the parameter alpha is strictly negative. We also assume that the measure nu is not trivial and has a strictly positive weight, which may be possibly infinite. So in this case, as we said before, the small fragments split very quickly. So when you observe your fragmentation, as time goes on, you have fragments that are smaller and smaller, and so they split quicker and quicker. And after a while, a very interesting phenomenon occurs. This very quick splitting will produce some particles of mass 0. This phenomenon is called shattering by the physicist, and I tried to explain it on this picture in the particular case where we simply take the measure nu, which is a Dirac measure at the sequence 1/2, 1/2, which just means that one fragment always split in two fragments of same size when it's split. Okay. So let's consider this case. On the right, there is a picture describing the fragmentation. And I will take a point x, any point x in the interval 0, 1, but I exclude the dyadic number in order not to be an extremity of the one of the fragment I will be formed. Okay. But consider any other x, and we will follow the size of each fragment as time goes on. So of course, it will first split in a fragment of size 1/2, then 1/4, 1/8, and so on. And the time it needs to reach the mass 2 to the power minus n writes as a sum of n random variable ti, which are all distributed. So ti is an exponential distribution of parameter 2 to the power minus alpha times I minus 1. Okay. So if you consider now you let n tends to infinity, this means that at the time sum between 1 and infinity of the ti, your fragment has reached the mass 0. In other words, your point x has been reduced to a fragment which is reduced to a singleton. And this sum of ti, it's easy to see that it is finite. You just take its expectation and its convergence series, and it's finite. And this is true for all the point x. So in finite, I mean, all these points are reduced to what I will call dust in a finite time. And the quantity, the random variables we are interested in is the following random variable. So now I'm considering again any fragmentation with parameter alpha nu, with alpha negative, that's the only hypothesis. And I consider zeta the first time at which all the initial mass has been reduced to dust. In other words, it's the supremum of the time of the, say, zeta x, where zeta x is the time at which the point x is reduced to dust. Okay. So this is the random variable I'm interested in. And well, we have a first very interesting information, which has been proved in a different paper, which is that this time zeta is finite with probability 1. Okay, so Filipov proved this grosso modo in the cases when where the measure nu are finite. Then McGrady and Ziff, which are physicists, prove this for a model which is not random but deterministic, but which is kind of the equivalent model of the one we are looking at. And at the end of their article, they mentioned that they just discovered lately the existence of the paper by Filipov. And Bertoin proved this for general measure nu that may be also infinite. And well, as McGrady and Diff, he only learned quite late the existence of the paper by Philip Poff. So we can say that they proved this all independently. Okay. And some years ago, I obtained an upper bound on the tail of this random variable, which shows that this tail decrease quite fast, at least exponentially fast to 0, and in some case faster than exponentially. So we can prove that there exists some parameter theta. I will precise later what is theta, such that the tail is smaller than exponential times the constant time theta, at least for large t. So my goal is to precise this and replace the upper bound by something which is more precise. Okay, so before this, I just want to do the connection with random trees that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. So as I said, the family of random variable zeta we are considering may also be seen at the height of some random trees. So I start with the most famous example. Consider a Galton-Watson tree. So it's the genealogical tree of a Galton-Watson process, where we assume that the offspring distribution has mean 1 and a finite variance, sigma square, which is not 0. And we consider a version of this tree, of this Galton-Watson tree, which is conditioned to have a total progeny equal to n. Okay, we only consider the integer m for which it's possible. Such conditioning is possible. And we denote by hn the height of this tree, so the maximal distance to the root. So it's well known that Aldous in 1993 proved that this tree, rescaled by square root of n, will converge to what he called the Brownian continuum tree. And in particular, the consequence is that the height hn divided by square root of n converge in distribution to a constant that only depends on the variance of the offspring distribution times what I denote zeta BR, which is the height of the Brownian tree, or equivalently the maximum of standard Brownian excursion multiplied by square root of 2. So actually this result was proved before Aldous' result, just the convergence of the height by Kolchin in 86. Okay, so this random variable zeta BR is well known, and in particular, we have, it's a result of Kennedy, a precise asymptotic expansion of its tail distribution. I will give some results about this in 2 minutes. Let me just do here the connection with the fragmentation process we are mentioning. So Bertoin, in 2002, proved that this Brownian tree of Aldous is connected to a fragmentation processes in the following manner. So maybe I'll do, let's see if I can, yes, draw something. Okay, so imagine okay, so imagine this is the Brownian tree of Aldous. Here I have the root. And consider a real number t, strictly positive. I don't know if my picture is correct. And I will consider all the points of the tree that are at a distance which is larger than t from the root. And I look at the connected component. So I have this connected component, this, okay, my picture is not well done. connected component and say I have another branch here. Oh, sorry. So I told you, Christina, it was not always easy for me to, to deal with that stuff. Okay, sorry. So let's do something like this. Okay, and the last connected component. So I'm looking just to recall at the point that are at distance larger than t from the root, and I look at their connected components. So I look at, so this random tree is naturally endowed with a probability measure, which is a kind of uniform measure, which is the limit of the uniform measure on the Galton-Watson tree. And we look at the masses here of the three red connected components, and this gives me a sequence of masses that I will call Ft. Okay, and so as T comes bigger, these masses break in submasses. And what Bertrand proved is that this process Ft is a self-similar fragmentation process, and he computed this parameter. So the index of self-similarity is -1/2, and the measure nu is a binary measure, which means that it only charges sequence with only the first two terms that are positive. And so this measure is entirely characterized by the distribution it puts on the largest sequence, since the sequence S2 is then equal to 1 minus S1 nu almost surely. And it gives the distribution here of the largest fragment. Okay. So this, just to say that this well-known distribution zeta BR is part of our family of extinction time we are interested in. There is another example on which we have many information. And this is a generalization of the previous example. Now consider again a Galton-Watson tree, but with an offspring distribution, so still with mean 1, but with infinite variance. And we assume that the tail distribution of the offspring distribution is of this form. It's proportional to a constant time k to the power minus beta as k tends to infinity, where beta is some parameter fixed between 1 and 2. Then Duquesne proves that the height of the conditioned Galton-Watson tree, I recall that the Galton-Watson tree is conditioned to have a total number of nodes n, then this height divided by n to the power 1 minus 1 over beta converge in distribution to a constant which is explicit and depends on the parameter beta and the c which is here, times a random variable zeta beta, which is the height of what is known as the beta stable Levy tree of Duquesne, Le Gall, and Lejean. So these trees were introduced by Le Gall and Lejean to describe the genealogy of continuous state branching processes for those who know this object with a branching mechanism x to the power beta. Well, these are well-known trees, and so this zeta beta, its height again may be interpreted as the extinction time of some fragmentation processes. This was proved by Mirmont, exactly it was proved by Mirmont. And we do the same manipulation we did before with the as Bertoin did with the Brownian tree, and Miremont proved that here the beta stable Levy tree is the genealogical tree of a similar fragmentation process with parameters that are computed explicitly. I just give here the index of self-similarity, which is 1 over beta minus 1, so it's negative. And the dislocation and the measure nu is also explicit, but quite heavy to write, and we don't need it here, so I didn't give. Okay. And more generally, all the fragmentation processes alpha nu are connected to some continuous tree, which describe their genealogy, and which also can be seen as scaling limits of some discrete trees. I will not go into detail. And so our random variable zeta can be seen as the height of this continuous tree. Okay. So let's come back now to the random variable zeta BR, the height of Aldous Brownian tree, and zeta beta, the height of the stable Levy trees. For these two random variables, we have a precise result on their asymptotic expansion. So in the Brownian case, this was proved by Kennedy, and 3 years ago, Duquesne and Wang proved a similar result for all the zeta beta random variable. So actually both give a very precise result because they obtain asymptotic expansion of the tail of this random variable at any order. And I just wrote here on the slide the asymptotic expansion at the first order. So as t tends to infinity, they obtain the following behavior for the tail of the random variable zeta BR, and for the zeta beta, for beta between 1 and 2, Duquesne and Wang prove this result here. The constant C beta is given quite explicitly, but it's quite ugly. It's a function of an integral that depends on fraction of beta. So I didn't write it. So my goal is to try to obtain a similar result for the general alpha nu random variable zeta. Okay, so to state this result, I need to introduce two functions. So from now on, the parameter alpha strictly negative is fixed, and the parameter nu also is fixed, and I note zeta, the extinction time of the corresponding fragmentation process. And I will need the two following functions. So the first one, the function phi, is defined as follows. It's a way to measure the intensity of production of the largest fragment. I recall that S1 is the size of the largest relative fragment that is produced at the time when fragmentation occurs. So phi is defined like this, and phi is defined from phi by this equation. Psi is the inverse of x over phi, and it's well defined, at least for x large enough. It's easy to see. Okay, so below I just give an example to try to see the connection between the production of largest fragment close to 1. So here assume that, so we are interested in the rate of production of a fragment S1 which is close to 1. So assume that nu of S1 smaller than u has the following asymptotic behavior as u tends to 1. Okay, so if your measure nu is finite, you will obtain here that kind of behavior with gamma equals 0. And if it's infinite, we assume we have this power behavior. Then it's easy to check that phi will grow proportionally to x to the power gamma as x tend to infinity, and then psi will grow proportionally to x to the power 1 divided by 1 minus gamma as x tends to infinity. Okay. So, for example, for the Brownian case, it's easy to compute these two functions, and we have this following behavior. Okay. So before setting the main result, just a notation, I will use this symbol for two functions fg to mean that they are asymptotically of the same order, okay, meaning that for t large enough, there exists some positive constants such that f is between a times g and b times g. And the first result I obtain on the behavior of this tail can be written as follows. So we have to do an assumption on the function phi, which was that it's regularly varying at infinity. So this, just recall that this means that for all positive lambda, the quotient phi lambda x over phi x tends as x tends to infinity to power of lambda. And here, given this function, we have the power is necessarily between 0 and 1 excluded. So under this assumption, so typically this is the case when you have a power function. Under this assumption, we can check that the logarithm of the tail of zeta is asymptotically proportional to this function psi. Okay. And now my goal is to remove the logarithm and try to understand better how the tail behaves for large t. Okay, so here's the main result. So we have to do still an hypothesis, but which is really weaker than the regular hypothesis I just did before. We assume that this lim sup of the quotient of phi prime x over phi is strictly smaller than 1. So this is really not restrictive. First, it's easy to check that this lim sup is always smaller or equal to 1. So I just want to exclude the case where it is equal to 1. And in all interesting example, it is always strictly smaller than 1. Okay. You have to find where the function phi to have a 1 here. Typically, if you assume in particular that phi is regularly varying with an index gamma smaller than 1, here you obtain this lim sup is equal to gamma, so it's okay. So under this hypothesis, we obtain the following asymptotic expansion for the tail of zeta. So it's a bit abstract since it depends on this function psi. And well, the game then in practical will be to try to simplify this, but there's no way to do it in general. It's we'll have to do it case by case. So in practical, when we have a specific measure nu, we compute, try to have an asymptotic expansion of the function phi, and then deduce an asymptotic expansion of the function psi, and hope this will give enough information to compute a bit more precisely this integral and have some precise results. So in the next slide, we will see some example. Let me just precise here that this result can be simplified a bit when you assume that phi is regularly varying, because in that case, the function psi prime is proportional to phi over to phi t over t. Okay, so here the 1/2 come in the power then, and you have this asymptotic expansion. Okay, and I should also say that here I have this this sign which means same order. I guess that actually it's an equivalence, meaning that there exists a constant such that this is equivalent to the constant times this, but I'm not able to prove it in general. Okay, let's see some example. And let's start with some cases where the measure nu is finite. If the measure nu is finite, then easily the function phi is proportional to the total mass of the measure nu times x, as x tends to infinity. And so the integral gives first order expansion, which is the total mass of the measure nu, I don't know where okay, nu s times t, plus something which is negligible with respect to t, but which may be quite big. It's not, okay, it may be a power of t, typically. So again, in practical, our goal when nu is finite is to determine what is in this small o of t. So let's see some examples. So the first one is actually easy to check directly. We don't need the theorem to get it, but it's to illustrate how behaves this tail. So we will assume that each fragment, in this first case, each fragment split in k fragments of same masses. So if you start with a mass m, you obtain k fragments with masses m over k. Then for any index of self-similarity alpha negative, we obtain this behavior for the tail of zeta. Here we are able to have really an equivalent. And you can see that the parameter alpha is not involved in the exponential. Actually, it's hidden in the function c. But I have no idea of the value of this function c. Okay, so first example. A second example, we'll now assume that mass m, when it's split in two pieces uniformly. Okay, so we consider a uniform random variable on 0, 1, and m splits in species m times u, m times 1 minus u. So in this case, we will produce some fragment that may be close to 1, and then the tail decrease slower, and we obtain this order of behavior for large t. So there you can see that the alpha is involved here in the power over t. Okay, next example to show that things can become quite complicated with a quite easy example. I will now assume again that when a mass splits, it splits into two fragments, and now the size are given by a beta random variable. So I recall that the beta random variable is distributed on 0, 1, depends on two parameters. So that I denoted A and B. For symmetry reason, we can assume that B is larger than A. And the density then is proportional to the function x to the power n minus 1, 1 minus x to the power b minus 1. Okay, so in this case, things become more complicated to state properly. So again, I consider any alpha strictly negative, and we will see that the behavior of the tail will depend on some threshold. The first threshold is 1. So if both parameters are strictly larger than 1, we obtain exponential minus t. Now, if the smaller parameter is equal to 1 and the other one strictly larger, we have this t to the power 1 over the absolute value of alpha. If the two are equal to 1, well, this is a uniform case. We already talked on the previous slide. We have this 2 over alpha there. And now, if the parameter alpha becomes strictly smaller than 1, we have some additional term that intervene in the exponential. Okay, so it slows down the decrease. So we have this minus t plus something, positive constant times t to the power 1 minus alpha. And if the B also becomes smaller than 1, then we have power involving both A and B there. But there you can see that I have always assumed that they are all larger than 1/2. And now if you assume that at least one is smaller than 1/2, there will be additional term. So the next threshold will be 1/3. And you will have to add other power, I don't remember which one, but and so on. And so there is no easy formula to set up. And it depends on the position of A and B with respect to power 1/n. Okay, another example. Now we will turn to measure nu with infinite total mass. So the other example is a kind of extension of this one, and it's related to a model which is called the beta splitting models of Aldous, because David Aldous introduced a model of cladogram to modelize phylogenetic trees in 96, and these discrete models of trees were proved to converge in their scaling limit to some fragmentation trees with the following parameter. So this family of limiting models are parameterized here by a parameter beta, which is between -2 and -1. And the corresponding fragmentation is given by an index of self-similarity alpha, which is 1 plus beta. So it's indeed negative. And the measure nu, which again is binary, only charge sequence with 2 non-negative terms. And the way it distributes the mass to the largest term S1 is given by this formula. Okay, so you can see that here the function that is involved is u to the power beta 1 minus u to the power beta. So it's similar to the beta distribution we had before, except that here the measure nu is not finite. Okay, it's an infinite measure because beta is smaller than -1. So in this case, we can apply the result, and we obtain, at least for beta between -2 and -3/2, the following asymptotic expansion for the tail of the extinction time zeta. So the constant A beta, B beta are explicit here. You can see that if you take beta equal to -3/2, you actually obtain the measure nu that describe the measure nu that was used for the Brownian fragmentation. And the parameter here, alpha, is indeed -1/2. So up to a scaling constant in nu, this is the Brownian fragmentation. And you can see that in this case, the constant B beta here is 0, because we have 2 beta plus 3, so this is 0. And so we don't have this T here in this case, and we recover the result in the Brownian case. Okay. So now if you assume that the parameter beta is larger than -3/2, it's a -1 there. Sorry, there is a mistake. You can also do the calculation, but again, there will be additional term with a power of t that are smaller than 1, and that will add, you will have more and more power when beta will tends to 1. Okay, and we can also check with this approach that we can reobtain the information on the tail of the random variable zeta BR and zeta beta that rise as the height of the Brownian tree and the beta stable Levy tree. So we can recover partly the result of Kennedy, Duquesne, and Wang, except that here I just have the order of the tail and not a precise equivalent. Okay. And you can develop other examples, since there are people that know this model in the audience. For example, we can also obtain the asymptotic expansion for the alpha model of Ford and so on. Okay, so Christina, I have like 5 minutes to say a quick word on the proof. Okay.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so the idea for the proof is to use another extinction time, which is the extinction time of a typical point. By this, I mean that I take again my picture in the interval framework. You take a point uniformly distributed between 0 and 1, and you follow the mass of the fragments that contains that point as time goes on, okay? After a while, it will be reduced to dust, and the time at which this happens is denoted by I. And Bertoin proved that this random variable I is the integral of the exponential of alpha times a subordinator with a Laplace exponent, which can be built explicitly from the measure nu. Okay. So this is not exactly the phi bar, is not exactly the phi I introduced before, but these two functions are very close asymptotically, and well, that's enough for our purpose. So that type of random variable has been well studied by the Levy community, I would say. So we have a lot of information on this. And the connection, so what is the connection with my problem? Because, well, the problem is that this random variable I is smaller than zeta, strictly. So a priori, it's not obvious how to relate their tail distribution. But still, it's possible. What we can prove is that there is the following relation between the two tails, so that they are, well, they are the proportion, the constant of proportion, no, it's not a constant, I mean the function of proportionality between these two tails is given by this function psi over t to the power 1 over the absolute value of alpha. Okay. Okay, so this is one step of the proof, and the second step of the proof is to evaluate the tail asymptotic of the random variable I. And this is given in this second proposition here. So of course, you can check that if you replace the probability P of I larger than T by this function there, you obtain the previous theorem. So this second proposition, well, can be proved. As I said, we have a lot of information of this random variable I. In particular, we know that they have a density which satisfies an integral equation. And using this integral equation, well, we could set up this equivalence. Okay, so in I think it will be the last slide. I will explain quickly how to get this proposition 1. Maybe there are 2 slides. Let's see. Up. Okay, so how to compare these two tails? So there are 2 steps. The first step is to set up some connection between the tail of zeta and some moments of typical fragments. So what do I call typical fragment? Well, you consider 2 uniform points in 0, 1, which has so uniformly distributed and independent. And for each of these points, you follow the size of their fragment as time passes. And I write lambda IT, the size of the fragment at time t that contains the random variable ui. Okay. So the first result is that you can compare this probability with this expectation involving the size of those fragments. And this is quite easy, actually. It's just done by introducing the random variable st here, which is the sum of the square of the size of the fragment at time t. So f is the general fragmentation, and use the classical first and second moment methods. And this leads quite quickly to this. So once you have this, you have to conclude to understand how behave these expectation. And this is the last step. So first, the single expectation. So the expectation of a power of lambda t it's a question that we already studied some years ago with Victor Rivero. And I recall here what we obtained. And really the technical part of this proof is really this second proposition, which is quite long to prove, and which gives the expectation of the product of two tagged fragments. So here we can take a different power and give this expression. And hopefully, once you have this, when you go back to these bounds, well, the bounds match and you have the same function on the right and on the left. Okay, and I think I will stop here. I just wrote some references. First on the, well, classical references on fragmentation models. I talked quite a lot about them and the existence of shattering. I just didn't mention during the talk these references of Banasiak and Lamb, which is on a deterministic model for a fragmentation process, but they also talked a lot about this shattering phenomenon, this production of dust. And here the references on the tail of theta. And I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a lovely talk. It's really quite remarkable to me that you can make this close relationship between the extinction time and the extinction time of the uniform of the tag fragment, if I can put it that way. Could you maybe go back to the sort of key proposition? Yeah, so yeah, maybe one forward.
Forward, backward.
Slide 18, I think I was after, just so I could.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I can see the page on my.
Okay, you're on 17 at the moment. So it's really the key to this that this kind of this product, the expectation of the product of your two tagged fragments, that expectation is behaving like just the expectation of a single one, really. So
not completely, because you have this +1 here in the power.
I see.
Which, I mean, this +1 over alpha has measured the correlation, kind of correlation between the two fragments. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'd missed the +1 there.
Of course, I mean, it's not at all independent. And you're right, we have only one probability there and not the square, as we would have in case of independent. But the +1, yes, is kind of the...
That's where the correlation is kind of hidden between the two.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question? Is there anything anybody would like to ask? Matthias, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, looking at this connection between the tails of the tag fragment extinction time and the overall extinction time, I mean, this is all to do with passing from something to a maximum. And I wonder whether there is any progress that can be made by using sort of max type random distributional equations in order to attack these relationships.
Well, I don't know. I tried many things, and really the key point to get this relation was this first proposition there, the connection with the expectation.
So it doesn't look like you were ever looking for the larger of the two in your two tag fragments, or
no,
is that somewhere hidden?
No, that's right. But well, actually, I mean, this is not precise, since it's only, there is this constant there. So we lose some information there. We also lose some information there, okay? So, of course, first I tried to use the maximum of the death time of some fragment, but I didn't manage to deal with this. So probably, I think the result should be an equivalent rather than this strange term. And maybe there is another way to attack the problem and get better results. But I didn't manage to find it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Min has a question. Min, I don't know if you want to just unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Benedict. So I'm just wondering if you could say anything about the other tau. So the probability is that this extinction time is very small, and whether your method could be used or could be applied there as well.
Okay, so your question is the behavior in small time of the...
Yeah.
Okay, so well, that's a good natural question. So there are very precise results, as you probably know, in the case of the random variable of the height of the Levy trees. In general, for the fragmentation process, I don't think that precise result has been put in place. So for the height of Levy trees, we know that it decreased quite fast, the exponential of -1/t to the power something. I know that for fragmentation process, we can roughly easily get like power decrease, but I'm not aware of a more precise result in general. So that's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?